Okay, so we have 4 words. We've got theory, hypothesis, law, and fact. And the question is, how do they relate to each other? Well, first of all, there's a question that was answered on your homework, which was, what do those all have in common? And the answer is, they're all subject to change. So that's what they have in common, but that's not how they relate to each other. So let me explain that a little bit here. Now, if they're all subject to change, that means that some of them scientists are more certain of than others. So, when we make this web diagram of all these words, we need to have a scale. And that scale is the certainty scale. Down at the bottom, we have things we are less certain about. Up at the top, we have the things that we are more certain about. So if you look at those 4 words, theory, hypothesis, law, and fact, which one are we least certain about? That's right, hypothesis. And which one are we most certain about? Facts. Very good. So then, where do theory and law come into play here? So where do theory and law lie? Well, here's the thing. It's not down here. It's not in the middle. In fact, it really should be way up here, pretty darn close to fact. That's the way that we treat scientific laws and theories. Now, but notice when you draw this in that theory is just a little bit lower than law. And that's because theories are more likely to change just because typically they're tweaked a little bit. They're sort of refined and made a little more accurate as you go and as you go. They don't really get upended. And laws are really, really certain. They're basically just treated as fact anyway. But laws are very high up there. We've mathematically verified them. How do they relate to each other? A hypothesis is typically one of the places where science starts. And so what you start doing is you start doing some testing. And so you can actually do some testing, and then that testing can verify or become a law. We can put an arrow between hypothesis and law. And with a little bit of extra help in the middle, those words are explaining that through testing, a hypothesis can verify or become a law. Sometimes, though, the testing you're doing is not direct. Maybe it's more observations and you're collecting a bunch of ideas. Maybe you are testing them, though. But what you can do is sometimes that hypothesis could eventually become a theory. How? It's through gathering evidence. Okay? And when you gather evidence, you can actually support, or maybe your idea, your hypothesis actually becomes a theory. So then, how do laws, theories, and facts relate to each other? Well, here's the thing. Laws are pretty much treated as fact, and over time, theories themselves do get treated as fact. So we can actually say that over time, with increasing supportive observations, laws and theories can be treated as fact, which means we can draw some arrows in between law and fact and between theory and fact. And so you have a hypothesis that through testing or observation became a theory or a law, and now we treat it as fact. Well, where does that lead us? Well, now that you have that fact, you can now take that fact to the bank. What bank? You take it to the bank of knowledge. That bank of knowledge is now all the things that we know that can help us in our further studies, which is why you have a couple more arrows to put in. Our bank of knowledge will help inform new hypotheses. It also informs current laws that are on the books, the science books. Our bank of knowledge also supports all the theories that science has already come up with. And likewise, knowledge also supports the facts that we already know. In other words, knowledge is the basis of all of what we are trying to find out. For this middle of the picture, that's what we're trying to find out. Knowledge is what we already know, and so we use that knowledge to figure everything else out. Now there's 2 more arrows left. That knowledge helps us run the right tests. And lastly, that knowledge also helps us make the right observations and draw the correct conclusions from those observations as well. You are looking at a graphic organizer of the words hypothesis, theory, law, and fact, including our certainty levels and knowledge.